episode of Fullfunnel Live. Today we are co-hosting it with Amy Loesch. Amy is a fractional CMO at our client company called CHARLESGATE. And as promised, today we have pretty exciting and I think one of the most underappreciated topics in account-based marketing, account-based content. This is what our team worked very closely with Amy's team, and it helped to contribute to pipeline generation. And we would like to share with you all the process. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat, as always. And Amy, thanks a lot for joining me.
Absolutely, Andre. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let us know, guys, where you're all joining us from. Let us know in the chat. I saw Leslie from Nashville. Good to see you. Amy, where are you based?
I am based in Austin, Texas.
I'm broadcasting from Villarreal, Valencia, which is not that sunny these days. So curious to see where you all guys from. Germania from India, good to see you. Natalia from Italy, good to see you. Again, cool. We have a pretty international audience today. Kira, Toronto, good to see you. And just to let you know, my dear co-founder Vlad will join us in a second. To give everybody a little bit of background, CHARLESGATE is not a tech company. And obviously, whenever we talk about account-based marketing, everybody thinks about tech space, either service-based companies or software as a service, right? CHARLESGATE is in real estate. This is definitely an industry that you won't associate account-based marketing. That being said, this is where we worked on. The deal sizes are really high. The sales cycles are very long. And this is where you need to take consultative approach. This is not the space where you can just run a bunch of programmatic display ads and send outbound emails on steroids, right? So this would be our entire agenda for today. And first of all, Amy, maybe you can just start with a quick intro, sharing what CHARLESGATE does and your ideal customer profile, your role, and also mentioning Chief Outsiders, where you also.
Sure. So thanks again for having me. Great to see you, Vlad. So I'm a fractional CMO. So I work for Chief Outsiders. We're a national consulting firm of over 120 former heads of marketing and heads of sales. Worked over 80 different industries, across our company. And we work with CEOs and leadership teams to help them drive growth strategies and, whatever their business problems are. So we actually sit on leadership teams but work in a fractional capacity. So I've been doing that with CHARLESGATE now for 2.5 years. CHARLESGATE is a full service real estate firm based in Boston, and we serve, I'd say, the greater Boston area plus southern New Hampshire. And we're real comprehensive in that we offer services from, we'll work with investors and developers as well as single property owners, but we service all the way from consulting on when a new development building is built to marketing, sales, and leasing of the building, depending if it's a multifamily building or a condo, to property management of those buildings. And then we also have a traditional residential brokerage as well.
So it's like Andre mentioned, it's a very different kind of market. And just for people to understand, can you maybe share the different challenges of selling and marketing to developers and investors, as opposed to, let's say, and I know you had experience also in a more, of course, we cannot say traditional, but it's so weird that actually with this audience and in our world, we think of SaaS as something traditional. So how is then marketing and selling into the real estate, specifically to the developers and investors, different?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, it's a very long sales cycle. So really what we are mainly focused on, and particularly with the ABM program that we work with you on, is working with investors and developers of new development buildings. So new construction projects, right? So from the time that an investor developer identifies a piece of land all the way up until they get CO or certificate of occupancy on that building, it could be 2 or 3 years, right? So working with a partner like us, we actually like to get in early at the beginning stages, because we do consult with, design of the building and helping them to get funding. But oftentimes they don't realize the value of bringing in a partner in early, right? So that can be challenging, as well as just thinking about that long sales cycle. You're selling in, to work with a partner on a consulting basis, but the revenue doesn't come for a couple of years. So it's really an interesting thing to be thinking about as you're developing, your revenue pipeline. You're really thinking out, 2-3 years ahead of where you need to be revenue wise as you're developing your pipeline today.
So it would be really interesting to dive deeper, but I would love to ask you a question that we hear quite often from people who are attending our live sessions or our webinars. It's all about getting internal buy-in. A lot of teams want to launch account-based marketing for multiple reasons, either because of having a desire to go up market, or just because of the complexity of their product, right? But a lot of them fail to get buy-in from stakeholders and also from sales leadership. So a question to you, before we dive into the specifics of marketing to developers, right? Can you share with us, how did you get the internal buy-in to run an account-based marketing program? And what maybe were the key conversations that you handled at CHARLESGATE?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say I'm really lucky. So Michael DeMella, who's our managing partner, he's basically the CEO of the business. He really believes in marketing, and that's something that you don't find with a lot of CEOs who believe or understand marketing, and he does. And you can actually follow him on LinkedIn, because he's been an amazing contributor to content on LinkedIn and the idea of social selling. So it's something that he's already bought into and was already practicing before we started this. So we had the basics of what I would call sort of an ABM campaign before we came to you. And that was, but it was mainly, paid LinkedIn ads. We were doing some email. We obviously had, connections on our website, but we didn't have that full integrated piece between sales and marketing, and how you actually put that all together, and how you think more strategically about the content, based on the target accounts you're going after. We also didn't have like a process, I'd say, for, daily prospecting or identifying target accounts and prioritizing them. So, all that we knew was needed, and we knew that could actually help us moving forward. So it wasn't too tough to get buy-in from Mike to do this.
You mentioned several things that I think it's definitely worth to unpack right now. First of all, you mentioned, account prioritization, being more structured about your approach, and especially like when you have such a full service offering, you can be selling into developers who are looking to lease out their apartments. You could be selling to developers who are looking to sell out the condos. You could be offering them different services, from planning all the way up to property management if they're leasing. So I wonder, like, first of all, how did you select the focus? Because you mentioned you decided to focus on new developments of apartments, etc. So how did you decide on the one hand where to focus on? And then also, like, how did you actually prioritize those accounts? Also knowing this complexity of, okay, they're not all in the market right now, the long sales cycles, etc. So I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, we wanted to keep the program focused so that we could really get the process down, and then we could later on use it to apply to other areas of our business, or even to expand outside of Boston geographically. So what we decided to focus on was new development, of course, is, our main revenue driver, but specifically on multifamily, which is apartment buildings. So construction of apartment buildings. And we have an agency, an in-house agency called Authentic, who does amazing work on branding and go-to-market strategy for multifamily. So I think the integration with them as well was a nice way to, bring us all together as a team and think about how we put this in place specifically, for multifamily in Boston. And then, Authentic actually works on a nationwide basis. So then we could take it to other markets if we could prove out the success in Boston.
Love it. And coming back to our main topic for today's podcast, account-based specific content, a few things that I would like to emphasize on. The first one is that you are selling to developers, and they are very different from B2B marketers or sales or startup owners, right? These are not the people who are hanging out on LinkedIn all the day long, or generally speaking on social media, consuming content, liking, commenting, etc. Right? So the second challenge probably here is that when we think about social media, let's say LinkedIn platform, right? We always think about global audiences. We can do thought leadership program, right? And the content will be distributed across the globe or across our broader network, right? But your specific challenge is that your company operates in a very specific region, right? Mostly New England in the United States. So these are the main constraints, right? Two questions here. Looking back at pilot ABM program, what would you say were the key channels that worked out for you, and the key channels and the key programs? And then I will ask the second follow-up question.
Yeah, sure. So, you mentioned, small area and investors and developers not being on LinkedIn. So one of the things is that CHARLESGATE's been around for over 20 years. So we know a lot of people within the real estate community and are well connected, right? So the majority of our business in the past has come from client referrals or, introductions and that networking events, that type of thing. So when we actually take that to LinkedIn, which, we were in part doing, but not really, they're actually on LinkedIn. They may not be, active, but we were actually able to find that we could connect to the target accounts, and we know the target accounts we want to go after. And there's a lot of, real estate industry research ways that we can research different projects in the area. Build up is one, and we can go and we can actually find the target accounts that are in our area a lot more easier than maybe a SaaS account, because we know that there's active projects there or there isn't, and then identify those people on LinkedIn within those target accounts and then reach out to them that way. And surprisingly, it worked very well for us. So it was definitely, like, I think, an eye opener to our sales team on how well LinkedIn could actually reach the targets that we were going after.
I think this is one of the biggest lessons for a lot of companies, because when they try to post something on LinkedIn and they don't see engagement, especially if sales team is involved into it, right? They might be frustrated, or they say, okay, nobody is consuming that content. I don't see any meaningful engagement. So why doing this, right? But the truth is that in many verticals, and especially in these conservative verticals, right, these people could be just lurking on LinkedIn. They are not engaging, they are not liking, they are not commenting, not something that we are seeing in MarTech space or sales tech space, right? But it doesn't mean that they are not consuming the content. And also, what I have noticed, and this is the question that I wanted to ask you, that in these conservative niches, in these conservative markets, you don't often see companies or vendors creating really good thought leadership content, right? Quite often it's very generic, maybe companies' press releases, we are happy to announce, or whatever, companies' pictures with everybody smiling, we attended the conference, or whatever, or very generic news, right? But not the content that addresses the jobs to be done or the strategic initiatives or challenges of your target accounts. So coming back to my question, do you feel that it's indeed worth waiting, and it can influence the sales process and influence the pipeline generation?
The content?
Yeah.
For sure. So luckily, we had Mike already paving the way with his thought leadership content on LinkedIn. And so he got us started in that direction. And we have a really strong content marketing person on staff as well who knows the real estate industry. So we were in a good spot when we started the program with content. And so it was really about, how do we think about our target audience and taking the expertise, the case studies, all the work that we've done in the past, and turn that into relevant content that that has to do maybe with a specific project that our target account is working on, right? So we could connect to them through LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw your project XYZ, and we've done these 5 projects that are very similar, and really bring immediate value and credibility, to the conversation, and then back that up with content that we're either posting on LinkedIn, but that we could send to them directly.
That was a very nice remark from Juan Pablo, our neighbor from Barcelona. People forget that the content can and must be used in private DMs with your network on LinkedIn, likes of a newbies. So, a very good one.
Absolutely. And that was something, that our sales team, I think, didn't realize, right? So once we started reaching out and then, sending them content through DMs or following up and with email and content, they saw how well it worked. And to your point about, it's not about necessarily engagement and likes, maybe people are lurking. We started to hear anecdotally, oh, I saw your post on LinkedIn the other day. It was great, and so we know that our audience is there, even if you don't necessarily see it.
I really want to underline this. I think I've seen it in other niches. We did a similar podcast episode with Test Trail, that is a company that builds these tools and sells them to Q&A engineers, quality engineers in software teams. And when you look at their profiles on LinkedIn, you very frequently you don't even see a picture, like a photo. You just see like this half-empty profile. They have never liked, never commented. And when you observe that, you think like LinkedIn is absolutely not the place to market to them. We know maybe they're active on some communities, but not so much on LinkedIn. And I think actually this was proven wrong, because like exactly as with you saw this engagement. And I think like what's amazing for you guys is that you're even seeing engagement when Michael posts about something very specific, like zoning policies in Boston, which is like so local, and yet you might have like 50 or 60 people engaging from your market. But back to my point about the opportunity, I think there is a big opportunity if you're in a niche market like that, even though you might consider these people not being active on LinkedIn, because they're not usually, but just because you start posting content that is actually relevant to them, you're going to stand out. It's much easier to stand out in a market like that than it is to stand out in our market, where there's so much noise, there's so much content already being produced. So I just wanted to underline this for everyone. And it's not just about content and engagement, and also like Juan Pablo said, it's also about the opportunity to actually start conversation, drive those meetings, and end up obviously with new business. So just wanted to underline, I think this is like really important for people to understand. And I wonder, like, we spoke about content. I think you mentioned as well that you were looking at the projects because you wanted to go after developers who had a new project coming up, working on a new development project. So if I understood you correctly, you were actually checking out these developers, these target accounts, as we call them, and trying to understand, okay, they have a project, this is, this many units in this location, they're likely to have these kind of challenges. And then you were selecting or even creating content that was specific, that you could basically refer, okay, we did a similar project, et cetera, et cetera. So in a way, you were creating content that was aligned with that specific account, or at least like sharing that. Is that what you did? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. As I mentioned before, CHARLESGATE has over 20 years of experience in the Boston market, right? So, and working from anything from single family homes up to, 200 unit buildings. We've worked on over 60, at least, new development projects throughout the area, have over 3 billion in assets under management, right? So we have all this experience that we can take and then apply, a specific lens to a project because likely we've done something very, very similar, or in an area of Boston that's very similar. So, for example, we were looking at a project that was in the Allston-Brighton neighborhood, and we've done probably 10 different projects right around the area. So it was easy for us to pull market data, show how we were able to beat the market in terms of the rental market and in terms of driving rents, and help to accelerate revenue faster for these different projects based on our approach to leasing and marketing, right? And so making that connection of if you can go in and you can invest early at the right time and help to build a brand and start to generate interest in the building early, way before you're close to CO, right? And start to get that interest, and demand generation comes early. You're going to accelerate your leasing quicker. You're going to reach absorption quicker. You're going to have a cash flow come in sooner, right? And then you're going to improve your overall investment on the project. And we've done that time and time again, and in that Allston-Brighton neighborhood, right? So we were able to take all of that we've done in the stats and put it together in a really great piece of content that resonated so well with that investor.
Love it.
I'm sorry, Andre. Just wanted to deconstruct this for everybody. Maybe they couldn't really follow that and can't maybe see immediately how that could apply for them. So I think like the first thing that I heard here was that you figured out what is the most important goal that these developers have. And you were talking about absorptions. Just for the folks out there, it is about how quickly you can rent out, lease up your properties. So how quickly you can start to make money out of the property, because the longer it sits, the more money you're wasting. And you knew that this was especially important to developers right now this year, because there were high margins. There were, high interest rates and low margins, I wanted to say. So basically, when you were deciding to create that content, you were looking at a number of things that were happening in the industry, knowing what their top problem was, and then you basically were educating, hey, we know this is important for you, this quick absorption and having basically the ROI, increasing your margin, especially this year. And if we look at similar projects we did there, we can help you beat the market. We can help you get there. We can help you basically make more money, right? And I just wanted to kind of deconstruct it for people when they want to apply it to themselves. Is really like you selected a very specific account, we call it account cluster, or a very specific use case, new development of apartment building, multifamilies, as you call them. Then you said, what are the biggest challenges of these accounts that have that use case? And you knew because of the low margins and high interest rates, it's like, how can I maximize my profit here? How can I make sure that I'm actually not losing? And how can I, as quickly as possible, rent those out? And then you were creating content to show them exactly how they can do that, which was like very valuable and useful for them. But also it helped you create that awareness, because if I understand correctly, there is no, like, not all developers have that idea, oh, we should just start marketing early and, doing things like that. So you had to work a lot to generate that awareness, this kind of change their mind or change the way that they think about marketing their properties.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you said it, way better than I did. But also I think there's, value that we can add early on. So if they're even considering whether a project should move forward, right? And are looking on at trying to get financing. So we can actually help them to evaluate the market and, put together a sample pro forma of what it's going to look like to operate the building in the first couple of years, what their cash flow will look like, that they can actually then take to potential lenders to secure debt or equity. So we've done that, many times. And when you can go in and add that type of value early, so that I wouldn't necessarily consider that content, but going, you get a meeting and you can show them, you can take their data and show them what you can do. It adds that value early and it builds that trust that we can actually help them through every stage of their project. So when it comes time to actually going out and leasing up the marketing the building and leasing it up, we have the operating know-how to be able to do that.
Awesome. So one of the tactics that we used, we call it internally account love letters, and hopefully you liked that concept, right? This is the tactic where basically we create a super specific account content, right? Based on known strategic initiatives or the challenges that we were able to discover through one-on-one conversations or through different engagements, right? So from my experience, this was one of the, let's say, most valuable tactics, right, when it comes to account engagement. I would love to ask you to share a little bit how did you leverage account love letters in sales, and maybe the process around creating them. Maybe just share a specific example.
Sure. I mean, it's honestly very similar to what Vlad had just articulated so nicely. Really identifying what their problems are, what are their challenges, and there might be things that they don't even know that they have or that they can't see, right? And then we can go and create a piece of content that identifies what those are and then shows what our solve is, right? So it could be, for example, their project is near stalled construction, and we've had that experience working with other investors or developers before, so we can actually create a piece of content on here's what you can do to think about how do you get out of this stall, and that could be for whatever the reasons are. But if it's securing funding, for example, as you mentioned before, we can help them put together that operating plan and do that through a piece of content that shows them the similarity with their business. And so again that it earns immediate trust when you're able to show results and market data that directly applies to whatever their challenges are.
But maybe one of the very specific questions that everybody might have: how to distribute that content, how to ensure that your target accounts will actually see and consume it.
Yeah, so we started, by connecting through LinkedIn, and then we would try to, we'd get their email address or try to get a meeting. And I think the best way is if you can get a meeting and get in front of them. So then, and you research their project beforehand so that you know the right questions to ask once you're in that introductory meeting. And then you can get as much information for them as possible on the project. And in many cases, they might be willing to share specific data, right? So if they're able to share like operating expenses and things that allow us to help create a sample pro forma, we can then walk away from that meeting with the right information to then create a piece of content that is super relevant. That's the best way to do it, right? But if you can't get that meeting, then it's really about, researching as best you can what their project is, and then putting together some case studies around, what you think their challenges might be, and sending it to them, either DM through LinkedIn or through email.
I remember, I think PT, who was the main salesperson during the pilot, one of the two founders, but also playing the role there, mentioned that, how did he say? I think that people were already kind of educated before, they already knew what you were all about, when he was able to share this piece of content with the target accounts and then would go in a meeting afterwards, that they were already quite educated about what CHARLESGATE did and how you might be able to help them. That was very useful as well for him during the sales process.
Yeah, and that's part of the full funnel approach, right? It's that making sure you've got that cadence of continuous posting on social, not just reaching out directly, but that you're establishing that thought leadership. You're putting out the right cadence of content that so that that creates this awareness, right? So just like you said, they're familiar with us by the time he's reaching out to connect with them.
I wanted also to mention one of the things you said to kind of, again, help people connect the dots. I think you said that you were also able to provide a lot of value to your buyers, even if they're early on in their projects, by essentially creating a business case for them. The projections of the return on investment of the project, which is something that you need to have anyhow, right? But I think for you, it was really good as well, because we know that, for example, in sales, we just know that when you're able to create a business case for a client, which kind of communicates, okay, this is what you can make if you don't do anything, and this is what you can make if you basically deploy our approach or work with us, essentially. You will like there is no better way to communicate the value, especially to business people and developers at the end are very number oriented at the end. They do this to, of course, get the ROI. So I thought that was so clever of you that you did it like that. And so on the one hand, it provides a value. So you can't really sell them your product yet or your service. So you figured out, okay, what can we do to provide them value so early on? And then at the same time also to use that to collect all this information that we can then demonstrate in numbers how by working with us they can benefit and what the ROI would be. I thought that was so brilliant. And with all of these tactics in place, what were the results of the program? And this was, of course, a pilot program that you just rolled out 3 months ago. I mean, started rolling out, basically rolled out just a month ago or so. So I wonder, like, so far, knowing, of course, that you have such long sales cycles of 2 years, but what were the results so far?
Yeah, so I'd say first and foremost, we developed a process for prospecting that we didn't have before. So I think before, we had a process for managing our pipeline once we had an opportunity and, how we were going to close the deal, but we really didn't have a process for the beginning piece of how do we identify the target accounts? How do we organize them in such a way that we can prioritize who we want to go after so that we can focus the sales team's time? How do we create a daily cadence, a daily habit of social selling and follow up and following up in different stages and the focus for the sales team and what they're going to target that week. We didn't have any of that, right? So first and foremost, putting that in place was a huge game changer for us to be able to organize our activity and focus the time on where we think there's a likely opportunity, where there's going to be a project that can turn into an opportunity that can hopefully turn into a deal down the road. So that's first and foremost. So once we are able to do that, and then we can start to get, some introductory meetings out of that, we start to see the flywheel happen, right? Where we actually are finding more opportunities through this. We've added a new channel, a new avenue for us to find opportunities than what we were doing before with just networking and client referrals. So now we're adding those opportunities into our pipeline and starting to manage those into closing deals. So I'd say the results have been great. We've probably added at least 10 opportunities so far from just that program. And we're close to closing, I'd say, our first big one, which would be really great in the next, hopefully, couple weeks.
Awesome.
Thanks a
This
lot
is
for
amazing.
sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing.
We have a couple of questions from our community, but before we'll dive into community questions, I would like to ask very specific question around what you have shared. So having an experience of working with partner like Fullfunnel.io, right? What would you say are the benefits if you have a partner helping you out with developing the strategy and rolling it out versus like trying to figure it out in-house?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We couldn't have done it without you. We had tried on our own before, and we didn't have the process, right? We didn't have that whole, I would really say, full funnel piece, that beginning piece of really being able to bring the marketing and sales together, show us, how beneficial that is, right? The whole process of prioritizing target accounts, researching them, and thinking about what all your next actions are and your next steps you're going to take. We didn't think about that before. So working with your team, with Staffo, he was a great leader for us to spend a few hours every week on teaching us your process, but adapting it for our business, right? Because not every business is the same. So I think being really flexible to think about, how is real estate different? How is this long sales cycle different? How are these investors different? And so how do we want to adapt the program to make sure that it fits your needs? So really good about doing that. and then setting that process and working with our sales team, because PT, as you mentioned, who's our lead sales team, he didn't post on LinkedIn before. He wasn't like super active. And now he's very into it, right? So, Staffo took a lot of time and worked with him to establish that habit and get him comfortable with it and see the results. And, I think once you start seeing the results, seeing the feedback, seeing that you're getting meetings as a result of this activity that you're doing, it's like super powerful, right? So that they see that this actually works and then they want to continue doing it. So I don't, without that structure and that, your wisdom and knowledge and your experience of having worked with so many different clients, I don't think we would have been able to do it on our own.
Appreciate it a lot. It also reminded me about dozens of hours that we spent all together internally when Staffan was bringing quite challenging questions from you and thinking how to solve it, because again, it's not the market where you can buy a software to enrich accounts and then just create ChatGPT created emails to data pretended to be personalized, right? Send and expect revenue. So thank you so much for sharing this. We have a couple of questions from our community, so maybe let's pick them up. A question from Amy: how to position the initial email or conversation to the executive of the target account that is not too generic but not too heavy either, since it's the first personal intro?
So this is one of the things that Fullfunnel will teach you if you engage in a program with them. And this is what we really learned from Staffo, was to research. First of all, you're thinking about on your target account list, who do you want to connect with? And once then you want to do a little research on that person. Do you have any connections in common? And we actually had lots of connections on LinkedIn in common, so there could be a thread there. Or did you go to school together? What are the things that you can reach out to and sort of make a personal connection with that person? Also really understanding, in our case with the real estate, with the projects, do they have an active project? What do we know about it? What are the challenges there, and how have we seen that tape play over and over again in the things that we've done, so that we can add that value. So we really think about the customization of that first initial outreach, target it based on whatever that personal connection you might have with them, and then think about, from a business perspective, how what you've done can really help them with what their challenges are. But be light about it, right? It's not really, you're not there to sell. You're just there to really make the connection, get a response, and then try to get a follow-up conversation or meeting. So don't go out with the heavy sell.
Yeah, like you said as well, in a follow-up, you were using content as well, and you were selecting content that was more useful, more specific to the projects that I have. Like you mentioned that example where you already had 6 projects in the same area as one of these targets. I want to say target accounts, like as the developer that you were approaching, to use the normal language, normal people's language. And so that also helped them to continue that conversation, engage them again and again, and eventually book those calls. And I remember also, like, we have to also give credit to PT, who was like so amazing, and just like picking up the phone, just calling them and booking them, a get together, a meeting, and then of course things become a little bit easier after that first initial discovery call.
Yes.
So
I feel I just wanted to add 5 cents here. I feel there are 2 also things that are really important. The first one is always having a genuine reason to reach out. So why you are reaching out, right? Because if you're not, we already forget about pitch slapping, right? So send connection request and then immediately pitch. And this is absolutely broken playbook. But then a lot of companies, they can send, hey, I went to the same school or whatever. We used to work for the same company. But then the question, what's next? Or I know a company we used to work in the past. They sent a lot of connection requests, for example, to startup founders, congrats with the funding. And then they ask a question, but what's next, right? So it's not that hard to get connection request accepted after it, right? But you need to have a good playbook, how you're going to engage and nurture that relationship. And one of the best probably pieces of advice here, I always think about the old Dale Carnegie's book, How to Make Friends, right? Which is the classic book for everybody in marketing and sales. So just use these principles, right? If you'll go to any meetup, you're probably not likely to pitch anybody, right? Or you're not likely to start talking about yourself. Hey, I'm marketing manager, I'm helping with blah, 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 right? So obviously you'll open the conversation, you'll try to find the common touch points, right? And that's another piece of advice that I can provide here.
All right.
Yeah.
We had one more question that you wanted to share, Andrei?
Yeah.
Or all right. So yeah, do you wanted to say something?
I use an AI to personalize content for each target account or buyer.
No. I mean, I think, we use AI when we're producing content at mass, to write a blog article or something like that. But the thing about AI is it's really great to help you. I think the best application of AI is when you're actually using your own content to help you to drive efficiency, not when you're going out to find content off, the internet and create something. So helping you organize your thoughts, to create efficiencies. But when we're creating content for specific target accounts or buyers, we're not using AI because it has to be so specific to what their challenges are and to our process and approach. And we have an approach that's very different than other real estate firms out there. And we are looking at specific projects that we've worked on in the past with specific market data. And in the case of, if we're doing something like a sample pro forma, we're actually using, data from the client to be able to do that. So it's all content that we create ourselves.
And yeah.
So it's like the tool is only as smart as what you feed it, the data that you feed it, right? So it's not about using the AI as a tool to create new content to give you the message, but it's more to just improve the efficiency of the existing content that you're producing. I think that people should actually use it like that as a tool rather than a replacement of that creative. Yeah,
you need to be authentic, and
a machine that is really good at copying is not really going to help you become very authentic.
No.
It will be very straightforward. There is an old quote: "A fool with a tool is still a fool," right? Which is very relevant to.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, to that use case. So another question from Niels on LinkedIn. My feed is filled with all these posts claiming that lead generation doesn't work, but that we have to engage with demand gen programs because only 5% of our target addressable market is in the market, actually. How do you see this in relation to account-based marketing?
Yeah, I mean, to me, account-based marketing is really being proactive, right? You're not waiting for people to come to you. So when you think about lead generation, a lot of times that's making sure you have the right content on your website, that it's optimized for SEO, so that when people are searching, they're coming to you. You have the right, lead gen capture forms and workflows set up through your CRM to make sure that you're, going back out and reaching out to them, and then, maybe getting in front of a salesperson. That's really kind of lead gen. With demand gen, you are going and you are putting thought leadership content out there, as we talked about before, to create an awareness about your brand. And then you're actively going out and finding your targets and contacting them. You're not waiting for them to come to you. And you're doing this, with a partnership between marketing and sales, right? So that you're making sure that you're both aligned on, who the targets are, what your message is, and that you're able to create that right content to be able to do that, and the right channels, whether it's a DM on LinkedIn or it's follow up through email or however. But that's how I see the difference.
And
Yeah,
I think
beautiful.
there is, sorry, I just wanted to say, I see there is an important nuance to all of this. Even if you look at this question, Niels, you try to separate demand generation from account-based marketing, from lead generation. And obviously, lead generation, in a nutshell, the way how Amy described it, you don't need to look at LinkedIn posts. I would just say it's pretty enough to take a sober look at the performance of your lead gen programs, right? Not just looking at MQLs or whatever, but just holistically look at how your lead generation program produces revenue and unit economics. If it's working for you, feel free to continue lead generation. There is no problem, right? But if it's not working, then you are in problem. And now, here's I feel really important point. A lot of people, especially on LinkedIn, they try to separate different motions from each other. Here is demand generation, and you need to go all in. Here is the brand, and you need to go all in brand. Here is ABM, you need to go all in brand, in ABM. Here is the sales enablement / buyer enablement. This is what you need to do, right? But in reality, this is what Amy mentioned. We all always advocate for full funnel approach, which means that you influence the entire buyer journey, from how are you going to create awareness among the buying committee members of your target accounts to how you generate sales opportunities with them. And there are two more steps. How fast you can accelerate their time to value, which is all about client success, right? And then expansion, because if you don't have meaningful client success, then you need to forget about expansion, right? If your customers are not getting any value out of your product or service, you won't be able to upsell, right? And then if you are selling technical product, then it's just the red flag that indicates that you have a churn issue. So as simple as that, always think in a cohesive model. How can you influence that journey, right? And the points here is what we do in account-based marketing. We always look at these three lists of accounts: cluster ICP, future pipeline, and active focus. This is how we do the prioritization based on how likely certain accounts would become sales opportunities, right? This is where marketing and sales should spend all their time proactively. But at the same time, not neglecting to other lists, because if you're not working on future pipeline, at one point you'll have a significant problem when you'll squeeze out everything from existing one.
And I love also wanting to highlight what Amy said. It's not necessarily just inbound. It's not necessarily just outbound. It's all bound, in a way that you are using content and marketing to create awareness. And then your salespeople, working together with salespeople, are then leveraging that awareness and engagement with your content to start conversations. So you're not just waiting passively, but you're also not just reaching out cold and with a generic message to everyone. And a follow-up question on that, because we spoke a lot about demand generation and content and thought leadership on LinkedIn. And a really relevant question from Luke is, what if your targets are not on LinkedIn? And just wanted to remind everybody, maybe you didn't tune in from the start because we were discussing this at the beginning. To our big surprise, although we expected that, real estate developers are not like B2B marketers or salespeople very active on LinkedIn. You may even check out their profile and you don't see a lot of activity. However, you shouldn't assume, and luckily we didn't make that assumption and it worked out for CHARLESGATE. So you shouldn't assume that LinkedIn they are not lurking, they're not reading. And in niche markets, it can actually be an advantage, because like for CHARLESGATE, it turned out that even if you're posting about real estate in Boston, you can still get a lot of relevant engagement, as long as you're doing everything that Amy described, not just putting the content out there, but also proactively connecting to those people and building those relationships. But I think it is worth answering that question. And I think we can share some of the anecdotes from our own experience about other ways to engage buyers that are not active on LinkedIn. But maybe Amy, you'll, maybe not in CHARLESGATE, but in other companies that you worked at, you had that situation because you did work on a lot of different projects. And I wonder, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you can find their email or phone number, that those are obviously other channels that you can be using besides LinkedIn, and we do. There are a lot of ways to get that information, different services out there to find that for your targets. But then the same approach that you would take on a DM on LinkedIn, you can take via email, which is less intrusive than maybe calling. But then calls could be maybe part of your follow up later on after you've sent email.
And I think you mentioned two other things. You mentioned that that there were a lot of these networking events, so that there were the specific, I don't know if there were like some associations or other types of organizations that the developers belong to that you could leverage to just like visit them at the places where they hang out and meet each other and be part of the community. For if you're not local like your company is, there are in some cases other communities. I mentioned earlier during this podcast episode, QA engineers, quality engineers, and other teams. They may not be so active on LinkedIn, although there as well it worked. They are very active on some of these niche, either Slack or no, it's not Slack in their case, it's Discord communities or other kinds of communities. And it's just amazing, like even like a much smaller community than LinkedIn, which is much more global, but the level of engagement and kind of conversations they can get started there are just amazing. And I think there was another thing that you mentioned while we were actually talking about your project before, that you had some partners, so other companies or service providers. I don't know if it was the lawyers or other kind of vendors, well, partners of developers that you also sometimes collaborated with. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And first to your point about events absolutely are a great way to go out and to network. And whether it's like in the example of real estate, there's like in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Apartment Association. I think every state has one of those. They put on events. Then there's industry research companies like Build Up that put on events. So there's all kinds of events that you can go to network, or we tend to do speaking opportunities at some of these, or have a booth so you can get in front of your audience. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's the traditional ways of networking and meeting people, and within your industry, and particularly like within real estate, there's a huge network of other players, as you say. So there's architects, there's attorneys, lawyers, lenders. So when you creating connections with those, one of the things that we actually saw on LinkedIn though was that we would go and have a second degree connection with one of our targets, and they would be connected to like 100 other people that we knew, right? So it's just that we're in that type of a small industry. There's going to be someone else that can make an introduction for us, right? So having a strategy, to your point, also that's not just like focused on your target accounts, but also reaching out to those partners within the ecosystem, whether it's directly or creating content that might be relevant to them, is also a big piece of this as well. Because if you can get someone to make an introduction for you, that's a lot better and more genuine, someone who can actually provide a referral than just that cold outreach.
And I think, yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to say, also mention like how one channel is leaking into the other, and how you're basically trying to create a series of touch points essentially, and how you will maybe go to an event and hear, DT might go to an event and hear about, oh, I've seen your content, and give him compliments about his content. So they have seen him on LinkedIn, but the fact that now they've seen him on LinkedIn, they see him in the event, he might actually follow up later on with some other people he met on the event on LinkedIn, and they may start following and seeing. So actually trying to kind of think about journey and multiple touch points, and not just like very transactional. Oh, I'll go to an event and I'm going to come back home with some business or some leads, or I'm just going to reach out to a bunch of people on LinkedIn and expect this transactional thing to happen where I will, but actually just using all the different opportunities to build that relationship, to get in touch and again and again and again until the time is right.
Sure.
I think this
And
is one of the things you were
tip on
doing.
that. A tip on that, with an event, if you're a speaker, you're sponsoring the event in any way, you'll oftentimes get a list of the attendees prior to the event. So it's a great way for your sales team to take that and identify who they want to talk to, right? Make a game plan so that you make that event productive for you.
Thank you so much. And also, Luke came with a follow-up question. I wanted just to add 2 cents, or to summarize everything. I feel that the most important thing is just to really nail down your ideal customer profile, not just ending up with generic one, right? Because this is only the answer to the question, what are the accounts that we want to go after, right? And the second one is deeply understand their buyer journey, not just being biased by platforms. Everybody says LinkedIn, let's go for LinkedIn. Because, for example, with Vlad, we do a lot of projects when our company sell to manufacturing engineers. So think about companies, Coca-Cola, Nestle, etc. And these people, they don't even have social profile, or maybe they have a profile on Facebook where it's just John D. Dot, and that's it, right? You don't even know if that's the right person, right? And there are no updates at all. So you need to think about how you can influence, and exactly what Amy mentioned. Think about other channels, right? Communities, associations, events, maybe private events that you can leverage to engage with these people. So that's the key. But maybe let's quickly cover the last question for today. The follow-up question from Luke: if this relationship building concept is not intuitive to sales, do you create a playbook for SOP for the team on exactly what to do? Is it significant training to see a success with this approach?
Yeah, so I think, in general, most people who are in sales are relationship builders, but maybe not in the way that we're talking about here, right? So I'll use PT, who I love, as an example. Like, he's fantastic at building relationships and has done that, but through personal relationships, networking, going to coffee meetings and golf. So taking, that skill set and then applying it to LinkedIn was not something, that he was familiar with, and it needed a little training, and we needed to create a playbook and a daily, habit for here's what you need to be doing, researching these accounts, going and, commenting on people's accounts, posting yourself, directly connecting, following up. And it's something like a working out, right? It's like a muscle you have to build. You have to do it every day and create a habit of it to get comfortable with it. And then you see that it works, but it's absolutely possible to do. It's just, taking those skills, the things that they're already good at, and using it in a different medium.
Wow. Thank you. This has been one of my favorite episodes, talking about live case studies. So Amy, I think this was a masterclass for a lot of people, especially if you're in a niche industry, have long sales cycles. These things work really well. Is there a place where people can go and learn more about CHARLESGATE, about maybe Chief Outsiders, yourself? What would you recommend people if they wanted to connect to you or learn more about your organizations, your work? Where would you send them?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with myself. Again, I work for Chief Outsiders. You can just find us, our website, chiefoutsiders.com, or, follow us on LinkedIn for sure. We work with all different size companies across all different industries. So if you've got a growth challenge that you need some marketing or sales help, definitely reach out. As far as CHARLESGATE, CHARLESGATE.com is our website. You can learn more about our services, past projects, case studies, everything there. We also have another site called transformingcities.io. And that's really our content site. We have a podcast, we have blog articles. You'll see Mike and Chris Arnold, who is the co-founder of Authentic, who's our marketing arm agency. There's a lot of content from them on there. You can follow both of them on LinkedIn. They're both thought leaders on LinkedIn. And finally, we actually have a webinar next LinkedIn Live next Thursday. on 11/21 at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And the topic there is proven new development strategies for 2025, how multifamily developers are getting 4x their ROI. So if you're interested more in real estate and learning what we do, that's a great webinar to join. If you miss it live, obviously you can check it out another time.
And I would highly recommend to follow Amy as well on LinkedIn, as probably you rarely have a chance to get connected to a seasoned B2B marketing professional. Amy, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Vlad. I really enjoyed working with you and Staffo. I really appreciate the chance to come talk about it here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys as well for fantastic questions. Happy to see your feedback that you loved the session as well. So stay tuned and we'll come with new sessions next week. Take care, everybody. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. I can't, you're mute. Is it my,
Yeah, you have to go back, leave stage at the bottom under 10 step.